The ruins of a once mighty world rise from the earth like whispers of stone. Columns fractured yet unbroken, temples crumbling but still majestic, amphitheaters echoing with the faint ghosts of voices long gone. This is Greece, the cradle of Western civilization, a land where myth and history intertwine so tightly that separating the two feels impossible. And it is here, in these landscapes of marble and olive groves, that one of the most extraordinary stories in human history begins. Imagine a world where gods walked alongside mortals, where thunder was the voice of Zeus and the sea raged with the fury of Poseidon. In the shadow of Mount Olympus, ancient storytellers spun myths that were not mere tales, but explanations of the universe itself. Every mountain, every storm, every birth and death was connected to the divine. Archaeologists today uncover fragments of clay tablets, intricate pottery, and burial sites that bring us closer to understanding these first whispers of Greek identity. The myths may not be literal truths, but they reflect a people reaching for meaning, order, and greatness. Geography, too, played its role in shaping destiny. Greece was not a single flat land, but a fractured canvas of jagged mountains, deep valleys, and scattered islands. This terrain divided its people into countless independent communities, each isolated yet bound by shared language and belief. The sea became their lifeline. From the shimmering Aegean to the Ionian waters, the Greeks learned to master the waves, forging trade routes that carried not only goods but also ideas. It was the sea that connected them, that allowed myths, customs, and innovations to spread, even as mountains kept them apart. But before Athens, before Sparta, before the philosophers and playwrights, there were older civilizations, ancient precursors that laid the foundations. On the island of Crete, the Minoans built sprawling palaces like Knossos, their walls painted with vivid frescoes of bull leapers and sea life, suggesting a society both wealthy and deeply spiritual. Their ships ruled the waves, their culture reaching across the Mediterranean. Yet even great societies fall. Around 1450 BCE, disaster struck, whether from natural catastrophe, foreign invasion, or both. The Minoan palaces burned, their dominance vanished, and a new power rose from the Greek mainland. This was the Mycenaean civilization, remembered in epic poetry as the world of heroes. The Mycenaeans built massive citadels with walls so immense the later Greeks believed giants had raised them. They left us tombs filled with golden masks, weapons, and treasures, signs of warrior kings who sought glory in both life and death. They were the people of Agamemnon, the conquerors of Troy, immortalized in Homer's Iliad. Yet the Mycenaeans, too, would fall into darkness. By 1100 BCE, their cities were abandoned, their palaces collapsed, and Greece entered what historians call the Dark Ages, a time when writing disappeared, trade dwindled, and memory itself seemed to fade. And yet, from this darkness, light would emerge again. Myths preserved by oral tradition became the seeds of identity. Simple villages began to grow. A culture once fractured would slowly rebuild itself. From the ashes of the past, a civilization was about to rise that would challenge empires, redefine knowledge, and inspire the world for millennia. The rebirth of Greece began quietly. Villages huddled in valleys, farmers tilled stony soil, and fishermen cast nets into the restless sea. At first glance, nothing suggested greatness. Yet beneath this modest surface, change was stirring. Around 800 BCE, a simple but revolutionary idea returned to the Greek world: writing. Adapted from the Phoenician alphabet, it gave the Greeks a tool not just to record transactions, but to capture poetry, laws, and knowledge itself. This was no longer a people bound only by memory. Their words could endure, and endure they did. Oral tales of gods and heroes passed down for generations were finally etched into verse. From this came Homer's Iliad and Odyssey, epic poems that gave voice to a collective identity. Achilles' rage, Odysseus' cunning, Hector's honor, these were not just stories of war, but mirrors for human struggle. Through them, the Greeks inherited a sense of who they were, shaped by both myth and memory. As their culture revived, so did their political life. The rugged geography of Greece ensured no single power could easily dominate the land. Instead, city-states, polis, emerged, each with its own character, laws, and ambitions. In Athens, democracy began to take root, where citizens gathered in open assemblies to debate, vote, and shape their destiny. In Sparta, a starkly different vision prevailed, a society built on discipline, military strength, and obedience. To be born Spartan was to be trained from childhood for the battlefield, to place the city above self, to endure and conquer. The Greek world became a patchwork of rival cities, sometimes allied, often at odds, but bound together by shared religion and festivals. Every 4 years they gathered at Olympia to honor Zeus with games of speed, strength, and skill. The Olympic Games, a tradition that echoes to this day. These festivals were more than competition. They were a declaration that despite wars and rivalries, the Greeks were one people under the gaze of the gods. Meanwhile, art and architecture began to flourish. Simple temples of wood gave way to majestic structures of stone, their columns rising toward the sky in perfect proportion. Sculptors learned to breathe life into marble, capturing not only the human body, but the human spirit, its strength, beauty, and fragility. Pottery painted with black and red figures depicted daily life, myths, and battles, making every household a gallery of culture. Yet greatness also demanded innovation. Farmers harnessed the land with new tools and methods, sailors built faster ships, and craftsmen perfected techniques in metal and stone. Trade routes expanded across the Mediterranean, connecting Greece with Egypt, Persia, and beyond. In return, Greece absorbed foreign influences, knowledge, symbols, even gods, reshaping them into something uniquely its own. And at the heart of this growing world was the idea of competition. To the Greeks, striving for excellence, arete, was the highest calling. Whether in politics, war, art, or philosophy, the measure of a man or of a city was found in the pursuit of greatness. It was this drive that turned villages into powers, myths into philosophy, and scattered communities into a civilization poised to leave its mark on history. The stage was set. Leaders would rise, thinkers would challenge the very fabric of reality, and warriors would march to battles that would echo through time. Greece was awakening, and the world was about to take notice. As the city-states of Greece matured, they gave rise not only to soldiers and merchants, but to towering figures whose names would become immortal. Each city birthed leaders who embodied its spirit, thinkers who reshaped human understanding, and artists who turned stone and ink into timeless legacies. To speak of Greece is to speak of these people, the individuals whose brilliance transformed an age. In Athens, democracy had found its champion in Pericles. Tall, eloquent, and unyielding, he became the architect of the city's golden age. Under his guidance, Athens flourished as the beating heart of Greek culture. It was Pericles who oversaw the construction of the Parthenon, a temple so breathtaking that even in ruins it remains a wonder of the world. His speeches stirred Athenians to believe that their city was not just a place, but an ideal, an experiment in freedom, civic pride, and shared destiny. Future ages will wonder at us, he declared, and he was right. But Athens was not alone in greatness. Across the rugged lands of the Peloponnese, Sparta stood as its eternal rival, shaped by leaders of a different kind. Kings and generals forged a society where discipline was law and courage was survival. Figures like King Leonidas embodied this spirit, leading 300 Spartans against the vast Persian army at Thermopylae. Though they fell, their defiance became a legend, proof that valor, not numbers, could define victory. Beyond the battlefield and the assembly hall, Greece gave birth to minds that would question everything, minds that still shape the way we think today. Socrates, a humble stone-cutter's son, wandered the streets of Athens asking questions that unsettled the powerful and inspired the young. The unexamined life is not worth living, he proclaimed, challenging citizens to seek truth beyond tradition. His method, dialogue, reasoning, relentless inquiry, planted the seeds of Western philosophy. From his pupil, Plato came visions of justice, order, and the ideal state, preserved in dialogues that remain cornerstones of thought. And from Plato's own student, Aristotle, emerged a mind so vast it sought to categorize the entire world, from politics to physics, from ethics to biology. His influence would echo for centuries, shaping science, law, and theology far beyond Greece's borders. Nor were philosophers alone in their brilliance. Playwrights like Aeschylus, Sophocles, and Euripides filled the great theaters with tales of gods and mortals, love and vengeance, fate and freedom. Their tragedies were more than entertainment. They were moral laboratories, testing the boundaries of human emotion and divine justice. In comedies, Aristophanes wielded laughter as a weapon, mocking politicians and questioning society itself. In these performances, the Greek people gathered not only to be entertained, but to reflect on themselves. And then there were the historians, the keepers of memory. Herodotus, called the father of history, recorded the struggles between Greece and Persia with a mix of fact and legend, setting the stage for the discipline itself. Thucydides, more severe, chronicled the Peloponnesian War with a sharp eye for human ambition and folly, warning future generations of the dangers of pride and power. Together, these figures, statesmen, warriors, philosophers, poets, and chroniclers, turned Greece into more than a cluster of city-states. They transformed it into a beacon of human potential. Their names endure not as relics of a vanished past, but as voices still speaking to us across time, reminding us of what greatness looks like and what it costs. The legacy of Greece was not only written in words and deeds, but carved into stone, painted onto pottery, and woven into the rhythms of daily life. To walk through a Greek city in its prime was to see a civilization displaying its ambition and identity in every temple, marketplace, and theater. At the heart of Athens rose the Acropolis, a citadel of marble where the Parthenon stood like a crown upon the hill. Its gleaming columns, aligned with mathematical precision, honored Athena, the city's protector and symbol of wisdom. Sculptors such as Phidias adorned it with statues so lifelike they seemed ready to breathe. These works were not merely decoration, but statements of power and devotion, reminders that human hands, guided by the gods, could touch eternity. Elsewhere, sanctuaries dedicated to Apollo at Delphi or to Zeus at Olympia became more than religious sites. They were centers of culture, pilgrimage, and identity. The oracle at Delphi, a priestess shrouded in sacred smoke, spoke cryptic prophecies that shaped the decisions of kings and generals. Pilgrims traveled for days to ask questions of fate, trusting that Apollo himself whispered through her. At Olympia, the Olympic Games honored Zeus with contests of strength, speed, and skill. The competitions were sacred truces in times of war, proof that even rivals could unite under shared tradition. But life in Greece was not only about grand temples and festivals. It pulsed in the agora, the marketplace. Here, merchants called out their wares: olives, wine, pottery, bronze. Citizens debated politics, exchanged ideas, and gathered news. The agora was the beating heart of every polis, where democracy lived in speech and commerce thrived in exchange. For most Greeks, however, life was rooted in simplicity. Farmers rose with the sun to tend goats, sheep, and fields of barley. Women managed households, weaving cloth, baitas, baking bread, and raising children. In wealthier homes, slaves, captured in war or bought in markets, labored in workshops or kitchens, their silent presence and unspoken truth behind the grandeur of Greek society. Religion guided every aspect of existence. Sacrifices were offered to the gods before journeys, marriages, or battles. Festivals honored Dionysus with music and theater, Artemis with dances beneath the moon, Demeter with rituals of harvest and fertility. To be Greek was to live in harmony with the divine, seeking favor from powers greater than oneself. Education, too, defined the Greek experience. Boys in Athens studied literature, music, and philosophy, preparing to become citizens who could speak in assembly and fight in war. In Sparta, boys entered military barracks at the age of 7, hardened into warriors by discipline and endurance. Women's roles differed by city. In Athens, they lived largely in private, while in Sparta, women trained, owned land, and managed estates, while men served in battle. From art and architecture to religion and daily ritual, the Greeks wove beauty and meaning into the fabric of life. Their monuments reached to the heavens, their theaters echoed with tragedy and laughter, their markets buzzed with argument and exchange. And beneath it all was the belief that life was not just survival, but an opportunity to pursue excellence, to leave behind something greater than oneself. Yet such brilliance came with shadows. For every temple raised, a rival city grew jealous. For every philosophy debated, an army sharpened its swords. The achievements of Greece were dazzling, but they would soon be tested by conflicts that threatened to tear the world they had built apart. The brilliance of Greece shone like a blazing flame, but even the brightest fire casts long shadows. For as the city-states grew in strength and pride, they also grew in rivalry, and soon Greece would be consumed by wars that revealed both its courage and its fragility. The first great test came from beyond. In the early 5th century BCE, the vast Persian Empire stretched across Asia, a giant whose armies numbered in the hundreds of thousands. When Persia turned its gaze toward Greece, many believed the small, divided cities could not possibly resist. Yet, at Marathon, Athenian soldiers stood their ground, charging across the plain and astonishing the world with their victory. At Thermopylae, 300 Spartans under King Leonidas held back the tide of Persia, sacrificing themselves so that Greece might live. And at Salamis, Athenian ships outmaneuvered the enemy, proving that cunning and unity could defeat even the mightiest empire. These wars forged a sense of shared destiny, a belief that Greece, against all odds, had triumphed. But victory carried a price. With Persia defeated, Athens rose to dominate, using its navy to build an empire of its own. Its wealth poured into monuments, art, and philosophy, but also into arrogance. Sparta, suspicious of Athenian power, gathered allies and prepared for war. The Peloponnesian War, lasting nearly 3 decades, tore Greece apart. Brother fought brother, city turned against city. Thucydides, the historian, captured its essence, a war born of fear, ambition, and human weakness. When the dust settled, Athens lay humbled, its golden age ended, and Greece weakened, vulnerable to forces beyond its borders. In the north, a new power watched and waited. Macedonia, once dismissed as a rugged kingdom of hill tribes, now produced a king unlike any other, Philip II, a strategist who united the fractious Greek states under his rule. But it was his son, Alexander, who would carry Greece's legacy to the ends of the earth. Alexander the Great, tutored by Aristotle himself, led armies across Asia, toppling the Persian Empire and founding cities that carried Greek culture from Egypt to India. Wherever his soldiers marched, Greek language, art, and philosophy followed. Though his empire fractured after his death, the world was forever changed. This was the Hellenistic Age, an era where Greek ideas mingled with Eastern traditions, creating a new, cosmopolitan world. And yet, even greatness is not eternal. Rome rose in the West, and within centuries, Greece became part of its empire. The independent city-states faded, their power eclipsed, but their influence on politics, art, philosophy, and science was absorbed by Rome and carried forward into history. The flame of Greece did not die, it was passed on. Today, when we walk among the ruins of the Parthenon, when we read the words of Plato or Aristotle, when the Olympic torch is lit once more, we are touching the legacy of a people who lived thousands of years ago, but whose spirit endures. Ancient Greece was not perfect. It was flawed, divided, and often brutal. Yet it dared to ask questions no one had asked before. It dared to build beauty that still inspires awe, and it dared to imagine what humanity could become. In the end, that is the story of Greece, a civilization born of myth, tested in fire, broken by pride, but immortal in legacy. A reminder that greatness is fragile, yet ideas once set free can last forever.